The Hellfire Academy is up and running as its two newest students arrive, Quentin Quire and an unfortunately named mutant called Snot. The students, numbering only a handful, are taught the basics of how to be a villain. They are taught everything from self-preservation to how to properly send a press release. At midnight, Wendigo trains the students in combat through a series of one-on-one duels. On their first night, Snot is paired against Quire, who easily defeats the overmatched newbie. And as punishment, Snot is taken away to the principal's office. Quire remains intent on bringing Idy and Brew home safely, yet despite his pleas, Idy will not leave until she avenges Brew, and so Quire begins searching for Brew's shooter. Eventually, he manages to obtain a meeting with the principal, Cade Kilgore. Cade expresses his disappointment that Quire's not blossomed into the mutant villain he had hoped, and Quire's mental probes prove useless, as the Philistine, powered by the siege, has been able to counteract Quire's psychic abilities. And as punishment, Quire is sentenced to detention, an ordeal that has transformed the freshly returned Snot into a new man. We'll find out next issue how the mystical Siege Perilous will affect Kid Omega.
So the Hellfire Academy is definitely serious business. They've made a guy like Snot a viable villain.
That seems to be the entire purpose of the Hellfire Academy. Cade goes into it saying that they just want to create villains so that he can sell Sentinels. It's very pragmatic.
I definitely think there's more to it than that, though, because Cade specifically recruited these Wolverine school heroes.
Well,
I think that's more like salting Wolverine's wounds.
In a way, yeah. It also helps associate Wolverine students with villains as well. So people might know that, hey, that kid used to go to the Wolverine school. Maybe they're just training villains there as well, so
I need more Sentinels.
Exactly. The thing I like about this storyline is that Aaron's going back to his roots. The beginning of Wolverine the X-Men was just so great because he got to see a new school. It was all new with new classes, seeing all the kids interact with new things. And I think it's a smart move by Aaron because even though a couple of the recent arcs were decent, I think it had been trending downward since that amazing beginning. And this sort of reinfuses it with some creativity and fun.
Definitely. And when we take a look at some of the teachers, it's got a very impressive faculty. Mystique, I think, is definitely a top-tier X-Men villain, and her class seems deadly, but also funny.
It's hilarious. She's just teaching them to be selfish, you know? Only care about yourself when you go out there. But besides her and, I guess, Sabretooth, I wouldn't really classify these villains as top-tier.
I think Quentin even points that out.
He complains, instead I get Wolverine's drunken brother, a mojo with boobs, a West Coast Avengers villain with demons for hands, and a collection of Brotherhood of Evil cast-offs who together have beaten the X-Men a grand total of negative 500 times. It's certainly not the who's who of being a successful villain. Regardless, the cast is pretty damn amusing.
My favorite class was 7th period, which was Public Relations for Psychopaths with Madame Mondo. And she's like, you gotta know how to craft a credible press release, otherwise how will people know your demands?
Once again, very pragmatic, and I see this school as less of an academy and more of like a vocational school where they're just teaching skills of how to be a villain.
But you could argue the Wolverine school's the exact same, because they're teaching them how to be a hero.
They are,
you know,
but
like danger room exams.
But at the same time, they at least have stuff like English and history, so there is some actual learning to be done. Here, it was just, you know, PR stuff, or how can you use demons to your advantage, weak points of aliens. But I thought the funniest thing from the class list was actually the art of trolling using social media for evil with Madame Mondo. Maybe they're just going to be creating like screwball type villains.
Yeah. For Superior Spider-Man to just beat to death.
For Sentinels to beat to death.
Cade Kilgore Sentinels. I mean, while all this is going on, though, we also get to see Wolverine and Rachel Gray and kind of his team trying to track down these kids, figure out where they've gone. And they pretty much hit dead ends all over the place.
Wolverine even goes as far as making an empty threat, at least I think, that he's just going to disband the school after this. Because clearly they have not taught these kids what's right.
But I think what it's going to actually cause that to be an empty threat is Quentin Quire, like, who started out as kind of the worst student possible, is actually there for noble reasons. He wants to save Edie and bring her back. And to do that, he's going to be good.
Exactly, and I think this is just Wolverine being so down on himself as a teacher. At the end of the Savage Land arc, he just thinks he's terrible, even though...
Oh, he is terrible.
I think he in that arc, he did a good job of mentoring those kids.
They almost died.
They did, but they survived. That's the key. And I think he's done at least a better job than most people expected of him.
That's true. In the future, I'd also like to see like Evan and maybe iBoy kind of pop up and maybe from the Jean Grey side of things help Quentin Quire in some way. Maybe bring him back from whatever he's about to go through when he goes through that portal.
I almost want to see those guys hang back just so we can get more development out of ID, Quentin Quire, and Brew, as well as, letting these other Hellfire scrubs really get their spotlight. Don't you want to see someone like Mudbug doing something?
Those Hellfire scrubs are all just future Toads. Future janitors.
I felt so bad for Toad. And, he goes there for love, and he hopes that maybe he's got a higher place in this new school. But no, it's just back to being a janitor.
And to, rub it in, it's like the person he went there for is the one who's telling him he's going to be a janitor. Like, why couldn't Kilgore come out and at least give him the satisfaction of saying, you're a janitor?
I'm hoping that Toad does something heroic, and then maybe he gets rewarded with an actual respectable position back at the Wolverine school.
He could get promoted to, lawnmower, like gardener.
I'm sure he already does that. Well, actually, he probably doesn't need to because of Krakoa.
Then he's doomed. Anyways, as a grade for Wolverine and the X-Men, number 31, what would you give it?
I'd give this issue a 4 out of 5. And my reasoning behind this is that it's going back to what I enjoyed about this series to begin with. It's just going back to being fun and about schools and the students and the creativity that comes from that.
I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. I can agree with you that it's nice that it goes back to its roots, but at the same time, when you're just throwing in new characters who are pretty much going to be worthless, I can't really get behind that.
Thanks for watching B3 Comics' review of Wolverine and the X-Men number 31. Before we go, we have a question.
If you were in charge of the Hellfire Academy, what course would you create and who would teach it?
I think a great course would be Self-Acceptance with Counselor Toad.
Why would you ever take a class from Toad?
If you're going to learn self-acceptance, you have to learn it from someone who's been at the bottom. And he's been there for so long, and people like Idie, they really need to understand their mutant powers and come to terms with it.
Personally, I'd have a class called Villain Dialogue taught by Dr. Doom. Where you learn one-liners like, even gods know better than to attack Doom.
Leave your own thoughts in the comments below. And like always, if you like what you see, give us a thumbs up.